أوكي، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما تعلمنا وزدنا بفضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير. أم وغسل عيد لكل أحد لما مر آنفا. Right? It's for everyone, even if you're not going to go to the prayer. والغسل لإسلام كافر. So it says here in the حاشية ولو أنثى أو مرتدا ووقته بعد الإسلام وما في خبر ثمامة ابن can't see what it is something من أنه اغتسل قبل الإسلام أجيب عنه بأنه أسلم أولا خفية secretly ثم اغتسل ثم أظهر إسلامه بدليل رواية أخرى ويفوت بالإعراض أو طول الزمن لا بالجنابة على المعتمد. Right. So this is a general principle, is that things either have fixed times or they're either caused by fixed times or caused by events. Okay. So when this happens, excuse me, this happens. So for example, the issue of like tatabu' and wudu, do you have to do it? Do you have to do it in one go or not? So are you considered to have made wudu if you washed your hand, if you washed your face, and then a century later washed your arm, and then a century later wiped your head, and then a century later, inshallah, if Allah gives us a life of 400 years, you washed your feet? You know, it's did you actually do the action, or did it, fata bil i'rad, or was it kind of like ignored because you kind of like went and did something else? So here, this person becomes Muslim, and they're like, "Oh, mashallah, brother, you just became Muslim." It's sunnah, after you become Muslim, to make ghusl. So then he's like, "Cool," and then doesn't do it, and then still doesn't do it, and still doesn't do it, and still doesn't do it, until you get the sense that he's just not going to do it, right? So now it's no longer sunnah, right? Tahiyyat al-masjid, you entered the masjid, and you waited, and you waited, and you waited, and you waited, khalas, no tahiyyat al-masjid anymore. Answering the adhan, I don't know, right? Some things will be different, but otherwise, like you have as opposed to a time. So I think like the two rak'ahs after tawaf, I think they don't expire with that time, as far as I know. It's not the same. But usually, when you have an event which causes something, usually or often, it will be it's no longer recommended, or you will not have had done it if you wait a long time, such that you give the sense that you're busy with something else, right? So it says, right, he says, لا بالجنابة على المعتمد. So this person was never in janaba in his whole life. They became Muslim, and then they're like, "Oh, it's sunnah for you to make ghusl." So then they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to do that." But then the ajnaba, then he became junub. So now he's like, "Oh, what do I do?" So now if I make ghusl now, there's a ghusl that's wajib. Could I do both at the same time? Could I intend ghusl for that's a wajib plus the ghusl of my become Muslim? So yes, that's fine. Okay. So it says ويفوت بالإعراض وطول الزمن لا بالجنابة على المعتمد. Okay. Makes sense. Right. He says خال عن بكافر خال عن حدث أكبر لأنه صلى الله عليه وسلم أمر به قيس بن عاصم لما أسلم رواه الترمذي وحسنه وابن حبان وصححه. Right. وحملوه على الندب لأنه قد أسلم خلق كثير ولم يؤمروا بالغسل ولأن الإسلام تركوا معصية فلم يجب معه غسل كالتوبة. ومن سائر المعاصي. أما إذا لم يخلو من ذلك كأن أجنب ولو في الكفر فيجب عليه الغسل. Right? وإن اغتسل في الكفر, even if he made ghusl in kufr. Right? So here's, for example, you're married to a Christian woman. Okay? She was making ghusl every single time she finished her period. Okay? So we're like, that counts, right? You can sleep with her now because she made ghusl. Yeah, but that doesn't count. So now when she becomes Muslim, just after making that ghusl, she still has to make ghusl. Right? Because that ghusl was a ghusl of darura. But this is like a real ghusl, right? وإن اغتسل في الكفر. Right? Make sense? Okay. والغسل من غسل ميت ولو مسلما لخبر من غسل ميت فليغتسل. Right? So if you wash a dead person, it's sunnah to make ghusl. رواه الترمذي وحسنه وابن حبان وصححه. وصرفه عن الوجوب خبر الحاكم وصححه على شرط البخاري. ليس عليكم في غسل ميتكم أو ميتكم ميت أو ميت غسل إذا اغتسلتموه. ومن حجامة ودخول حمام لخبر البيهقي عن عبد الله بن عمرو بن العاص كنا نغتسل من 5 من الحجامة والحمام ونطف الإبط ومن الجنابة ويوم الجمعة. Right, so a hadith only rated by al-Bayhaqi, is that going to be sahih? Let's ask a bigger question. Musa, okay, Musa goes to Mexico, and in Mexico he meets a righteous Muslim sheikh. This righteous Muslim sheikh says that his righteous Muslim sheikh from England said that his righteous Muslim sheikh from Botswana said that his righteous Muslim sheikh from Vietnam said that his righteous Muslim sheikh from Japan said, back, all the way back to the time of the Prophet. Would you accept a hadith like that? Assuming each person is upright, religious, and is also a thiqah, he's reliable. Would you accept the hadith? We would not accept the hadith. We would not accept the hadith. So just because you have a chain of transmission, right? Just because you have chain of transmission and each of them are reliable, that's not enough. Why? Because there's an other factor that's involved as well. Okay? Now we're talking about like the hadith that's shadh, like you have a sound chain, but there's evidence that goes against it. So what's the evidence that goes against this? Right? That by approximately the year 150, 170, 200, approximately, you don't find hadiths that are ahad. You won't find a hadith, right, that only one person narrates. You're not going to find it. Okay? So you will be someone like Tirmidhi. The hadith that your sheikh narrates to you is not going to be unique. It's not. You're going to have heard that hadith 10 times, 20 times, 30 times. And if you did only hear it from him, you would tag it and say, "Hey, the hadith gharib, that's odd." Right? So for you to hear a hadith, the only person who quotes this hadith is Ibn Umar, fine. The only person to quote this hadith is Nafi' from Ibn Umar, fine. The only person to quote this hadith from Nafi' is Malik, fine. But there's a certain point where things start to move around, right? Let's say, for example, the hadith of Malik. Is it possible that there's just one person on the face of the earth that knows the hadith that Imam Malik narrated? Not very likely. Very unlikely, right? So what you find is a certain time in history where hadith start to spread. There's too many hadith narrators now, and there's too much haraka hadithiyya. So by approximately the second century, 150, 170, 200 approximately, all the hadiths are widespread. And so when you find this sheikh is the only person to quote it in the third century, for example, it's a bit funny, or very funny. In the fourth century, extremely funny. In the fifth century, yeah, forget about it. So Jalaluddin Suyuti, he mentions that in his beginning of the Jami' Saghir. He says, when I quote somebody in the fourth or fifth century, or the fifth or sixth century, better, you already know that it's weak. So Bayhaqi is 450, right? In the fifth century. Is it possible that there was a clandestine operation to hide this hadith from being widespread, such that nobody else ever knew it besides Bayhaqi and his teacher? It's not possible. So when you find a hadith that is only known in the fourth or fifth or sixth century or eighth century, right? You already know that it's not a hadith, or at least it's very weak, right? Like who's it? Muhammad Tabari. I think he's in the Imam Rafi'i, right? So you see a hadith narrated by Imam Rafi'i in Tahrir Qazwin. So Imam Rafi'i has a book, Tahrir Qazwin. So he'll quote, here's a hadith, or a quote from, so any hadith that he quotes by default is going to be weak, even if they're all thiqat. Because it's not possible that hadith is not known by anybody else apart from Imam Rafi'i in the 7th century. It's not possible. Okay? So general rule, the hadith rawahu al-Bayhaqi and that's it. It's not going to be sahih. Right? And even with the author of the 6 books, they might quote one sheikh, but they will criticize it if they've only heard it from that one sheikh. They'll say, هذا حديث حسن غريب. It's good. I mean, it's backed up by other evidence, but it's odd because it's only this person. Or this person isn't that good. Right? The Musnad al-Bazzar, throughout the whole book, لم يروه إلا فلان عن فلان. That's it. لم يروه إلا فلان عن فلان. Right? It's kind of odd. So Bazzar, I think, is 309 or something like that. Bazzar. Or 315. Al-Bazzar. Earlier than that. 392. Thank you. 392. So hadith is in Bazzar. It's probably there because it's only narrated in that way. It's very, very common. I'm just opening it here on Shamila. And let me just quickly open it for you, right? Tabarani does that a lot in the Awsat. لم يرويه إلا فلان. لم يرويه إلا فلان. Right? الطبراني no, البزار. Good. Shamila knows I'm human. Notice this. وهذا حديث لا نعلمه يروى عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إلا من هذا الوجه. وعبد الله ليس بالقوي. وعبد الله راشد لا نعلم حدث عنه إلا عبد الواحد. Right? So here's a hadith, right? Um, and it says the only, so he's saying حدثنا محمد بن معمر قال حدثنا أبو داود or Dawood. He says Abdul Wahid narrates from Abdullah ibn Rashid. So he says Abdullah Rashid, the only person we know to ever narrate from him, right? He basically doesn't exist apart from Abdullah ibn Zayd. Yeah, and he's not that good, right? Another example. ووهب بن لا نعلم وروى إلا هذا حديث ولا نعلم حدث عنه إلا so and so, right? So he's only narrated this one hadith. This is something that's another issue. Like he's only known for this one hadith. Uh, ولا نعلم رواه عن أعمش إلا يحيى بن سعيد الأموي. Right, this is what he's doing throughout the whole thing. هذا الحديث لا نعلم رواه عمش إلا عبيدة. This is not Ubaydah, this is Abida, I believe. Abida, not Ubaydah. Wallahu alam. Anyway, so he mentioned that throughout. Okay, and I just want to show you because it's important because it is actually something rare. I'll just stop share 1 second. Al-Muqidha. If anyone would like to listen to the Muqidha, I have about 10-hour 10-hour recording of the Muqidha. If anyone would like to look at that. You listening to it, Musa?
No, not yet, but I plan on.
Yeah. So also what I do is I go through I go through some of the things at the end of the book. Number one, is not too long. Number two, the tahqiq of Abdul Fattah Abu Ghudda. Number three, I add certain things from I think Al-Hazimi and Ibn Manda on Shurut al-Imma. What are the conditions of the author of the 6 books? So it's there's some quite cool things in it. Someone is going to mention Gharib. المرفوع and here we go غريب 43 page. Here. No. Where is this? Where it is. Like I might come with the Monker or something like that. Not sure where he put it. Sure where he put it. It's not in the Gharib. Book isn't that long. It just has a really nice quote in it that's very unique. So, Mudraj. Oh, yeah, 77. That's some page. Here we go. Here we go. So it says فهؤلاء الحفاظ الثقات إذا انفرد الرجل منهم من التابعين. No worries. فهؤلاء الحفاظ الثقات إذا انفرد الرجل منهم من التابعين. Right? So now we're going back to like the early period. فحديثه الصحيح. وإن كان من الأتباع فصحيح غريب. Imam Malik, you're the only person who rates this hadith. Okay, that's okay, not a problem. Given that you're super awesome, you're in the super awesome. So what's going to happen is I'm going to put the standards higher as I go down because it's now less likely that you're going to have a hadith. وإن كان من أصحاب الأتباع قيل غريب فرد. Right. So now the students of Imam Malik. It's funny. It says ويندر تفردهم. That's super rare. Right? So now we're talking about the time of the teachers of the authors of the 6 books. يندر تفردهم, that's very rare. فتجد الإمام منهم عنده 100,000 حديث. How many hadith did he narrate? 100,000 حديث. $200,000 hadith. You are in Maru in the year 200. Okay? And your sheikh narrates to you 200,000 hadith. Every single one of them you have heard before. And you go to another place in Khurasan, same hadiths. Another place in Khurasan, same hadiths. Another place in Iraq, similar hadiths. Another place in Iraq, the same hadith that person. So all of these people in Iraq, they all have the same hadiths, right? All these people in Egypt, they all have the same hadiths. And these people in Egypt, half of their hadith is the same as the people in Khurasan. It's like, okay. لا يكاد ينفرد بحديثين ثلاثة. So when you see this Sheikh of Bukhari, the Sheikh of Tirmidhi, the Sheikh of Abu Dawood, he narrates a hadith that nobody else narrates. That's extremely rare, right? That's extremely rare. That is a 0.1% chance, right? Not even less than that, sorry. Way less than that, right? So 2 out of 200 would be 1%, right? Two out of 2,000 would be 0.1%. So what? It's very, very rare. He says, وَمَنْ كَانَ بَعْدَهُمْ, like Abu Dawood, Tirmidhi, Ibn Majah, فَأَيْنَ يَنْفَرِدُ بِهِ? How is he not going to have a hadith that no one else narrates? مَا عَلِمْتُهُ وَقَدْ يُوجَدْ. He says, I have no idea, but it's possible. Right? So he says, ثم ننتقل إلى اليقظ الثقة المتوسط المعرفة والطلب فهو الذي يطلق عليه أنه الثقة. So he's not a giant. وهم جمهور رجال الصحيحين فتابعيهم فإذا انفرد بالمتن خرج حديثه ذلك في الصحيح. Right, so وقد يتوقف كثير من النقاد في إطلاق الغرابة مع الصحة في حديث أتباع الثقات وقد يوجد بعض ذلك في الصحيح دون بعض ويسمي جماعة من الحفاظ الحديث الذي ينفرد به مثل هشيم وحفص بن غياث منكر. Right, these are ثقات but they're not super amazing. فإن كان المنفرد من طبقة مشيخة الأئمة, right, the teachers of Bukhari and Muslim, أطلقوا النكارة على من فرد به مثل عثمان بن شيبة وأبي سلمة التبوذكي وقالوا هذا منكر. فإن روى أحاديث من الأفراد المنكرة غمزوه ولينوا حديثه وتوقفوا في توثيقه فإن رجع عنها امتنع, etc. Right. So you can imagine, so you know, so you can see the point he's saying. So now, if that's the level of the shuyukh of Bukhari and Muslim, right? So that means that when you are reading, if you as a hadith scholar, you pick up Tirmidhi. None of those hadiths are rare. I mean, they're not hadiths that only Tirmidhi narrates. That's for sure, right? It's Tirmidhi has organized it for you. It's not that it's rare. Okay, today we might find that it's only in Tirmidhi, right? That's because we don't have that many hadiths. But for them, it's like, yeah, these are, you know, it's like you know, Ammar knows his college and he sees a video about his college. So yeah, this person made this video and he organized it in this way. Somebody else did something else. He just organized it, right? But it's all known, right? This is my college, and this is the university I go to, and this is it, right? It's not something crazy. It's not like a department he's never heard of, or a department that nobody's ever heard of. It's not like that, right? Just different ways of putting this large body of information together. So now if you can imagine a hadith that only a Bayhaqi, right? So it says Rawahul Bayhaqi. It's like only Bayhaqi. We only know it in Bayhaqi, right? That's not just, that's going to be, it's like it can't be Sahih. Right? So, does that make sense? So it's not going to make it useless, but it just can't be Sahih, right? So forgive my hadith. It's like subhanAllah, I don't want to get into hadith. I keep getting to hadith. And all my Instagram posts are all about hadith. It's like, oh, what happened there? Anyway, it is important though. لخبر البيهقي عن عبد الله بن عمرو بن عاص. ويوم واستحداد أي حلق العانة وإغماء بعد الإفاقة للاتباع رواه الشيخان وفي معنى الإغماء الجنون، ويسمى الغسل ويسن الغسل للصبي إذا بلغ بالسن. Right, so he's now 15 years old, lunar years, right? 14 and how many days? 14 and a half, right? So 10 times 100, 10 times 15. Yeah, so like 14 and a half. He's 14 and a half. Today he's reached puberty, bisin, right? He's 14 and so 365 minus 150, 165 days, right? No, 100 and no, 200 and what? 200, 215 days. Is that right? No. Yeah, 215 days, right? إذا بلغ بالسن. So he's 14 lunar years plus 200 14 solar years plus 215 days. So I guess like a third of the 2/3 of the year. He's never had a wet dream or anything. Then it's sunnah for him to make ghusl. ولإحرام بحج أو عمرة أو بهما أو مطلقا للإتباع رواه الترمذي وحسنه. ودخول حرم ولو بلا إحرام قياسا على دخول مكة، ودخول مكة ولو بلا إحرام لأنه صلى الله عليه وسلم فعله في عام حجة الوداع بذي طوى وهو محرم كما في الصحيحين، وفي عام الفتح وهو حلال. What does halal mean? So it says وهو محرم كما في الصحيحين وفي عام الفتح وهو حلال. The opposite of محرم is halal. So what does halal mean? Not in ihram. So هو haram, he's in ihram. هو halal, he's not in ihram. الشهر الحرام, the sacred months. الشهر الحلال, non-sacred months. Right? Profane and sacred. Right? It was interesting. One translation was taboo. Translating it as you are in taboo, right? It's quite an interesting translation. A funny translation, right? Right. كما في right? So here we're treating the as a hadith source, not as a fiqh source, right? نعم من اغتسل لإحرامه من موضع قريب منها كالتنعيم لم يغتسل لدخولها، لأن المراد من هذا الغسل النظافة وهي حاسن بالغسل السابق. ووقوف بعرفة بعد الزوال، ووقوف بمزدلفة بالمشعر الحرام غداة النحر on the morning of Eid، ولمبيت بهما إن لم يغتسل لعرفة أي للوقوف بها لاجتماع الناس الثلاثة كالجمعة، فإن اغتسل للوقوف بعرفة كفى عن الوصل لمبيت مزدلفة. وثلاثة أيام من منى وهي أيام التشريق أي لرمي الجمار في كل يوم منها لما مر، ولا يسن لرمي جمرة العقبة لقربه من غسل الوقوف بمزدلفة يجسد مزدلفة، ولهذا لا يسن لكل جمرة. Right? I'm not going to do it for each of the pillars. ويستوي في الغسل للإحرام وبالبقية بعده الطاهر والحائض والنفساء. Right? So whether you're pure, whether you're in your period, doesn't matter. It's all the same. وتغير بدن إزالة للرائحة الكريهة. Right? You stink, therefore you are. I stink, therefore I am. Right? It's the philosophical paradigm of a teenager. Right? Yeah, I don't know. I doubt it. Right? The way this speaking, it sounds like it doesn't. You wouldn't do it. So وتغير بدن إزالة. So here then is difference between I am cleaning myself because Allah likes to be clean versus I'm doing a ritual. One is a non-ritual shower, then one's a ritual shower. وغيرها من زيادة كالغسل حضور كل مجمع من الناس وللاعتكاف ولدخول المدينة المشرفة لا غسل طواف ركن أو وداع وإن جزم الأصل بنسبته في الأول والنووي في منسكه الكبير بسنته فيهما. Right? So again, Zakaria Ansari so Sharqawi is rejecting what Zakaria Ansari says. So Zakaria Ansari is rejecting what Imam Nawawi says. So where's the taqleed then? And Imam Nawawi is rejecting what the Ashab said, or at least majority of them. And the Ashab are correcting Imam Nawawi, correcting the Imam. Right? Where's taqleed? There's no taqleed. In an absolute sense, there's no taqleed. Right? In a relative sense, there is. Relatively, yes, there is weight of precedence. Right? We just quickly find a nice quote here from Ibn al-Mundhir. What is it? Al-Awsat. So these are two books or three books. Two books, Al-Ishraf and the Awsat, are really good. Ashabuna. So Ibn Mundhir, mujtahid without any hesitation. Is it lumps? One second. You're talking about lumps. Let's find this. Oh, well, I must have missed that. Pretty sure it's here. Mention something like he's going in a certain direction based on his own opinion, but then he says, but the majority of ashab say this, so he kind of like shies away from it. Okay, I can't find it. But there's somewhere I've seen this where he's going in a certain direction. So he is now he's a student of the student of Imam Shafi'i. But basically he's thinking very independently. But there's certain scenarios where you see that he will basically follow his school over his own opinion because of the weight of precedence. So that does begin to exist. The weight of precedence is very heavy, but it's not absolute, right? Absolute weight of precedence, meaning I cannot question what you're saying. That's not true, right? So yes, it varies, but it's not 100% there. Can't find it though. خير. Okay, باب التيمم. Let's go to our matan then. Okay, so he says باب التيمم. التيمم لا يجوز إلا بالتراب الطاهر. Right? So we have to specifically use earth. وهو ضربتان ضربة للوجه وضربة اليدين مع المرفقين. وللمتيمم حالان أحدهما يجمع بينه وبين الوضوء والثاني ينفرد عن الوضوء. فأما حالة الجمع فثلاثة: أن يجد من الماء ما لا يكفيه لطهارته، وأن يكون بعض أعضائه طهارة جريحا أو قريحا يخاف من استعمال الماء فيه التلف، وأن يأتي ببعض الوضوء وينصب وينضب وينضب. I know what that means. وينضب الماء, puts the water away or the water runs out. وهو مسافر لا يجد ما يتم به طهارته. I think it means ينصب الماء, the water gets poured out somewhere. Okay, so he's mentioning three scenarios where you do wudu and tayammum together. أن يجد من الماء ما لا يكفيه لطهارته. He didn't have enough, but he had some. That you have an injury. ويأتي ببعض الوضوء. He did some of wudu and he pours and the water gets poured away, something like that. And he's traveling and can't find a way to complete his tayammum, his wudu. Right. So 3 and 1 seem awfully similar. But basically those are those two scenarios. وأما حالة الانفراد فخمسة عشرات, 15 times you may tayammum. Right. وفي 5 منها تعاد صلاة وفي 10 لا تعاد. فأما الخمسة التي تعاد فيها صلاة فالتيمم لعدم الماء في الحضر. Right. حضر meaning a place where there normally is water. So if you live in a city where there's normally not enough water, then that's not what we mean. Okay. وخوف فرط البرد في الحضر. Right. So these are all basically, and the whole concept here is النادر لا حكم له. Right. النادر لا حكم له. Right. We've discussed this many times, that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives a rukhsa, he gives a rukhsa because there's widespread difficulty. But when there's rare difficulty, it's not really like that, right? You know, this guy just got married and somebody said, hey, tell your wife the following words. This, this, this. And he's like, okay. And then it's like, oh, you just divorced her. And you're like, nah, it doesn't. And then it's like, yeah, she divorced her according to all form of their him. You're like, dude, are you joking? It's like, no, I'm not joking. Like, what? So that's really annoying, right? He didn't know that, but too bad, right? There are scenarios like that that are too bad, right? You married your milk sister. I don't know, whatever the situations that can be in, but normal situations not like that, right? فَالتَّيَمُّمُ لِعَدَمِ الْمَاءِ فِي الْحَضَرِ. It's not normal that there's no water in a place where there's normally water. وَخَوْفْ فَرْطِ الْبَرْدِ فِي الْحَضَرِ. Normally, you're at home, you have things around you to heat things up. So the water's super freezing. How is it that you can't heat it up? Oh, I actually don't have any gas or anything to heat it up with, or any electricity. Is that normal? That's not normal. Oh, okay. So you're gonna have to repeat that prayer. وَالتَّيَمُّمُ لِنِسْيَانِ الْمَاءِ فِي رَحْلِهِ. Right? So you had water with you and you were traveling in the desert, but you forgot that it was there. You didn't open the back compartment, so you forgot that you had put it there, right? So that's kind of like, bro, how did you forget? So it's not just it's not that you didn't know, it's that you forgot. So there's a difference, right? وأن يكون على موضع التيمم لصوقا. Right? What? So there's something excess. There's the place where you're putting tayammum, the موضع التيمم and wudu. So this is, I don't know, is that number 5? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? But excuse me. if there is a bandage on the place of tayammum. So you say, did you make wudu? No. Did you make ghusl? No. Did you make a proper tayammum? No. Why? Because I had a bandage on my face, had a bandage on my arm. So you neither made wudu nor did you make tayammum. So in which case you do your best, you pray, and then you repeat. وأن يضع الجبائر على غير طهر. Right? You had to do surgery on your thigh, but when you did that surgery, you were already in janaba. So now when they put that cast on, right, that doesn't count. So now when you take that cast off, you're gonna have to make up those prayers, right? Why? Because the cast is like khufs. Khufs only count if you put them on purity. Right? So this idea of praying and repeating, according to Imam Nawawi and before him Ibn Mundhir and Muzani, there's no concept of praying and then repeating, right? And this is in reality an usuli issue that we're talking about in the Amr, right? Did you do what you were commanded to do? Like I was in a city where there's 2 rivers on either side of the city, both ran dry for like 6 months, miraculously. Right? Did I do what I was asked to do? Yes, I made tayammum and I prayed, right? So, but the question is when you say sihha, when you say validity, does sihha mean that you did what you were asked to do, or does sihha mean isqat al-qada? Right? So is isqat al-qada and sihha, are they the same thing? In the Shafi school, they're not. According to Ibn Mundhir, Imam Nawawi, Muslim, yes, they are the same thing. You did what you were asked to do, and that's it. So there's no such thing as praying. So in a scenario like that, you could imagine, let's say, for example, I'm chained up against a wall, okay? And I can't make wudu and I can't make tayammum and I can't make ghusl, right? What do I do? Faqid al-tahurain, what do I do? You could imagine that, for example, I would pray, but then make it up later on because I didn't really pray properly, right? So you pray and then make it up later on, right? That would make sense. It also makes sense to say just pray now because that's what you did the best you could and that was it, right? Like you pray and that's it because you did what you were asked to do. That's also logical. It's also logical to say it is haram to pray now because you don't have wudu and you don't have a substitute either. So it's haram to pray, right? So you can't pray now, you just have to pray later. And it's also logical to say لا يجب الآن ولا لا يجب أداء ولا قضاء, right? You're not obliged to pray now or later because Allah hasn't given you the tools to pray. So the prayer time came in during that prayer time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not give you the ability to pray. So khalas, you're not obliged to pray aslan. You're not obliged to pray now or later on, right? Like the argument of some Hanafis that when there's no Isha, there's no Isha khalas. You don't pray Isha, period. There's no qada or anything, right? So you're in a place, the sun, the red of the sun does not disappear, even on the position of Imam Muhammad or the Sahibain, that Isha comes in when red disappears. According to some Hanafis, they say, look, there's no illah for wujub al-Isha, right? So the shart. So if we make imkan al-tahara a shart min shurut wujub al-salah, right? The ability to make wudu, we make it a shart of the wujub al-salah, khalas la yajib aslan. Just like somebody who's insane. They were insane before dhuhr and were insane until maghrib. Maghrib came in, khalas. They don't have to pray dhuhr or asr, that's it. Not ada'an or qada'an or anything. Right? Does that make sense? So, but the school says, pray now and pray later. Imam Nawawi, Muzani, Ibn Mundhir, pray now and that's it. There's no such thing as repeating, right? And in reality, this is a very, very difficult for people. Even Sheikh Nuh, who's, someone who's pretty strict and pretty serious, if you look at Reliable Traveler, what does he do? He doesn't mention Ibn Mundhir and these people. He doesn't do that because that's not his style. He mentions the Hanafi school. Says the Hanafi school does not ask you to do that because it is very hard. Someone has a cast for 6 months. You're telling me, bro, I just had a cast. My life's hard enough. And then you tell me on top of that I have to do qada for 6 months. It's pretty difficult, right? So he just quotes the Hanafi school there. Right? So when you're teaching this in a public setting, don't, if that makes sense. Just don't explain it and then explain the other position. Just don't even do it. Because 90% of your crowd does not have that level to do that. They're not on that level. They're like, Habibi, just give me a halal solution. Right? I have a really big bad cut on my thumb. It's gonna take 2 weeks to heal, like a big, proper, like nice, like half-inch cut into my thumb. I have a real proper plaster there, and I actually went to the doctor as well to check it out. You know, let's just wipe over and that's it. Right? And that's even a position in our school to begin with. Right? Al-Jurjani mentions it in the Tahrir, small book Tahrir by Al-Jurjani, right? Pre-Nawawi scholar, right? And exists in the school. And also the idea of not repeating the prayers exists in the school. But so don't mention that in a public setting, right? For many people, the deen is already impossibly difficult. Is that true? Like everybody else in the world is doing one thing, I'm doing something else. So you've already told me this is haram. You've already told me everything is haram. Every cool thing is haram, right? Every fun thing is haram. Right? I heard one brother say this, like literally, it's like, like everything's haram, right? Basically, like being religious is an impossible task. Now you've made it even harder, right? So that's the case for many people, right? It's very important to make the deen, right? Sufyan al-Thawri says this. He says al-tashdid yuhsinuhu kullu ahad, right? He says being strict, anybody can do that. Anybody can be strict. It's easy. It's haram to use fiat currency. It's haram to use Bitcoin. It's haram to be a part of any country that doesn't do this or do that, Okay, go and live by yourself, planet Mars. Right? It's easy. ولكن الفقه what's called الرخصة عن ثقة. Fiqh is to give people an easy way out while from a trusted source. Right? So you're going to give the fatwa of that's ascribed to Ibrahim to Ishaq ibn Rahaway that if you are breastfeeding or pregnant, you don't have to fast and you don't have to qada. Epic, fantastic. Unlike the sick person who has to fast later on, you're pregnant, khalas, you don't have to do anything. You're breastfeeding, don't worry about it. No fasting and no qada. What are the dawabit? What does he mean by pregnant? What does he mean by breastfeeding? Doesn't matter. Don't worry about it. So I've given a fatwa that's from an unknown source without any dawabit, without any criterion, and I just give it out like that because khalas is easy. That's not a rukhsa an thiqa. A rukhsa an thiqa is a real position within the four madhahib. Why? Because I actually have details. It's actually recorded properly, and I have details of what it actually means. Make sense? So when anybody gives a fatwa outside of the four madhahib, it's always going to be funny. You're not really going to know if that's true or not. Hassan al-Basri said that the blood is pure. What does he mean by that? Does he mean it's ma'fu anhu? Like it's excused? And if it is, what scenarios? What does it mean it's halal? Like you can just go and drink it. You can just go and drink blood. What kind of blood? Do you mean your blood? Do you mean an animal's blood? Or what does he mean by that? Right? And did he even say that? Right? So you'll see this quotes there. You find it in Bukhari. Hassan Basri said that, whatever, but like applying the fatwa is basically impossible. So in principle, you can follow a fatwa outside of the four madhahib. In practice, it's basically impossible. I've never seen it actually happen. Allahu a'lam. Okay, makes sense. So those are the 5 situations. Now, as you mentioned, 10 scenarios where you do not have to repeat. It says وهذه أحكام ما تعاد فيه الصلاة وأما العشرة التي لا تعاد فيها صلاة فالتيمم لعدم الماء في السفر, i.e. in a place where there's no water. وأن يكون الماء بالشراء ولا يجد ثمنه وأن يجد ثمنه ويحتاج إلى الثمن في نفقته وأن يجده بأكثر من قيمته أن يجد الماء ويحتاج إليه لشربه أن يجد الماء ويحتاج إلى بيعه في نفقته وأن يكون بينه وبين الماء عدوا أو حائل right? أن يطلع على الماء في بئر أو غدير ولا يجد ما يستسقي به، وإذا وجد الماء وخاف من التلف من فرط برد أو يخاف انقطاع رفقة، وهذا كله في السفر. وإذا كان في السفر أو في الحضر وبه مرض يخاف من استعمال الماء فيه تلف، فإن خاف إبطاء البرء أو الشين أو الزيادة في المرض فعلى قولين. Okay, so we have 10 scenarios, right? It's not really 10 scenarios, he's just kind of like expanding it basically. So he says there's water that's being sold, but he doesn't have the money to buy it. There's water that's being sold and he has the money to buy it, but he needs the money to support himself or to support the people he's with. There's water being sold and he has the money, but it's being sold for more than its value. Right? So, حفظ المال, right? وأن يجد الماء ويحتاج إليه لشربه. There's water, but I need to drink it. He finds the water, but he needs to sell the water in order to. So he has excess water. He has enough water for the next 2 weeks. He has to sell half of it in order to support his family or himself. There's water there. There's a big lake. وأن يكون بينه وبين الماء عدو أو حائل. Right? It's not safe to go there. There's robbers there. There's whatever. If he went there, he'd be killed. If he went there, his family would be vulnerable. If he went there, somebody would steal his car. Right? He has to leave his car on because there's a problem. The battery is dead. So if he turns the car off, the battery won't start again. And if he leaves the car on with the key in it, someone's going to steal it. And he can't drive down there because it's too steep. So he can't get out of the car, basically. I mean, he can get out of the car, but he can't leave the car. Right? Ever had that wonderful experience with Ammar Muhammad? Where the battery's dead, and if you turn the car off, you won't be able to start again? No? So some interesting cars in Kenya, Muhammad.
Yeah, it happens in Kenya.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of especially like where I come from, it's like a very sparsely populated area. Like you can find towns or villages until you go a very long distance.
Mm-hmm.
A breakdown or any issue on the way, then you'll have a big problem. You'll be there for long.
Yeah. Yeah, that protectors make it easy. Okay. So it says, okay, so there's ha'il. 8. The water is there in a well or in a stream, but you cannot get it. There's no way for you to get it out. Like it's a 20-foot drop. I need a bucket. I don't have a bucket. I actually can't get the water. I don't have a rope. Right, it's just there. I don't have a rope. I don't have a bucket. I don't have a pump. Right? إذا وجد الماء وخاف من التلف من فرط البرد. I'm really, really cold. And I'm really, really cold. It's freezing. I'm in the middle of this road, in the middle of nowhere. And if I make wudu, if I take my coat off, it's -50. If I take my coat off, it's very dangerous. Right? أو يخاف انقطاع الرفقة. If I went to go and get the water, my group would leave me. I'd be stranded. هذا كله في السفر. Right? So it's not normal to not have a rope or a bucket in a city, or not have anything, any means to heat up the water or get warm in a city. It's not normal. But when you're traveling, this can happen. إذا كان في السفر أو في الحضر وبه مرض يخاف من استعمال الماء فيه التلف. You fear that you're going to die a telef. Something's going to get broken, right? Your body's going to get broken. You're going to die, or you're going to get sick, or you're going to get worse, right? So he says, فإن خاف إبطاء البرء What if I made tayammum, it's going to take twice the time to get better? Oh, a shame, or I have a scar. If I put water on this thing, it's going to make a mark. Oh, a ziyada fil marad, or I'm going to get worse. فعلى قولين. Right? فعلى قولين. So is having a mark, is that considered an excuse? Is getting more sick, is that considered an excuse? Is delaying recovery is considered an excuse? على قولين, two positions. Right? Well, we're going to see the we're going to see the other, we see that in a second. Okay, make sense, inshallah? Okay, so then he says babu tayammumi. So he says وهو لغة القصد. It is to seek something. فتيمموا لا تيمموا الخبيثة. Do not look out, do not seek the low quality things. Right. فتيمموا صعيدا طيبا. Seek out good dust. وشرعا مسح الوجه واليدين بتراب طهور, pure and purifying, بنية, والأصل فيه قبل إجماع آية وإن كنتم مرضى أو على سفر. Right. وخبر مسلم جعلت لنا الأرض كلها مسجدا وتربتها طهورا وغيره من الأخبار الآتية. يختص التيمم بتراب ولو رمل له غبار, even sand that has dust. If you can imagine sand that's right next to the sea, and the sea goes where the sea goes up and down. So you were to run on that sand, there's no dust that rises whatsoever. Right? So that doesn't count. It has to be sand that has dust. فلا يصح بغيره كجص وكحل. What is it? Can't see this word here. ونورة. Right, Nora is this rock that you pound to make hair removal cream from. Right, so you get some kind of stone and pound it to pieces, pounded rock. لما مر والصعيد في الآية مفسر بالتراب الطاهر. Right, وهو يفهم اعتبار الغبار. قال الشافعي الصعيد. Right, when you say صعيد from the word صعد, to go up, لا يقع إلا على تراب له غبار, أي غالبا, فيكفي التيمم برمل له غبار إذا لم يلصق بالعضو, بخلاف ما لا غبار له أو له غبار لكنه يلصق بالعضو. Right, so it's like moist sand or something like that, like wet mud. Can you use can you use mud to make tayammum? You can't, know. ويجمع بينه وبين أي بين التيمم وبين طهره بالماء إذا لم يكفيه ماؤه. So you have a cup of water and you need to make ghusl. So what do? You pour the cup of water over you and then you make tayammum. إذا لم يكفيه ماؤه لطهره لطهره من وضوء أو غسل, والمراد الماء الصالح للغسل. فما يصلح للمسح فقط كالثلج أو بارد with a فتحة on راء لا يقدر على إذابته, لا يجب استعماله في الرأس على المذهب كما أوضحته في شرح الأصل. ويعتبر فيما ذكر تأخير التيمم عن استعمال الماء. So you have to use the water first, because perhaps miraculously the water will be enough. Okay, so that's number one. Scenario number one, you have to make ghusl or wudu, and you use the water that you have, and then you go and make tayammum. So you do both. وإذا كان بعضوه علة يخاف معها من استعمال الماء على نفسه أو عضوه أو منفعته. You're scared that you will die. You're scared that your arm will fall off. You're scared that the use of your arm will go away, or your eyesight will go away, or you won't be able to feel anything anymore. He says, ولا يعتبر في هذا تأخير التيمم في الغسل ولا في الوضوء بالنسبة لعضو العلة. Okay, so when you are in the first scenario, is you use all the water and then you make tayammum. So you do A and then B. In this scenario, you're doing A and B together, right? You have an injury on your what's it called? On your head, not your head, your foot, for example. No, it's not a good example. On your arm. So you wash your face. You have an injury on your one whole finger's covered up. Then what you're going to do is you're going to wash that whole arm as much as possible. You're going to wipe over the bandage, and then you're going to make a full tayammum with your face and arms, and then you're going to wipe your head and wash your feet, right? So tartib is necessary in the second scenario. It's not in the first, right? Okay. ولا يعتبر في هذا تأخير التيمم في الغسل ولا في الوضوء بالنسبة لعضو العلة، وتعبيري بالطهر وبالعلة أعم من تعبيره بالوضوء والجرح. Right? It's not necessarily a cut, nor is it necessarily wudu. Okay. وله التيمم أسباب. There are, so notice here, yeah. So there's certain reasons why you'd make tayammum. أحد وعشرون. So it was originally 15, right? Now it's 21. وفي الحقيقة أسباب للعجز عن استعمال الماء، والعجز عن ذلك هو سبب تيمم. Right? The inability to use the water, that's what it is. تسعة منها تعاد فيها الصلاة. He mentioned how many? 5. He said, no, there's 9. Right? فقد الماء بمحل يغلب فيه وجوده. Notice how he changed the phrase. Before he said في الحضر. And so he's saying, why are we calling it hadar? What if you live in a place where there's normally no water? Okay, that's different. What if there normally is water while you're traveling? Oh yeah, right. I'm traveling next to the Nile, right? The route is right next to the Nile. So am I excused for making tayammum next to the Nile because of the lack of water next to the Nile? No, because that's random. That's rare. So the point is, بمحل يغلب فيه وجوده. أي بأن تكون العادة وجوده فيه في ذلك اليوم من أيام السنة، وإن لم يجد في بقية أيامها. فلو عهد في غالب السنين أن المطر يأتي في ذلك المكان في ذلك اليوم مثلا، فاتفق أنه في هذا العام لم ينزل في ذلك اليوم مطر، قيل لذلك المكان إنه يغلب فيه الوجود. Right, notice in this desert area for this month of the year, the rain comes here. You're in that month. That's why you're traveling through, and there isn't, for some reason, didn't come. فالمعول عليه ذلك اليوم لا غالب السنة حتى يكون مراد بغلب وجوده بأن يوجد في أكثره خلاف لقاف لام، مش قاف لام قليوبي. I حاشد قليوبي on محلي. Okay, so he's not mentioning the illa here. They're going to mention about the nudra. Right? They always mention about the nudra, that it's a nadir, right? Anyway, doesn't matter. I'm trying to find a nice explicit statement why. But anyway, okay. So سواء so حضرا كان أو سفرا لغلبة وجوده فيه, right? A place and time when there normally is water, a place and time when there normally isn't water. ونسيانه أي الماء وإضلاله في رحله. You forgot that you packed water, or you can't find where your water is, right? So there's a whole truck, like a huge truck that's really, really big. I have no idea. There are so many things in that. It's like it goes back 40 feet. There's 40 feet of things. I don't know where the water is, right? So I know that I packed water and I remember it, but you've lost it, right? لوجود الماء معه ونسبته في إهماله حتى نسيه أو أضله إلى تقصير, right? There is some level of taqsir. You've kind of not done your job properly. So it's important that when we talk about excuses are going to be, okay, is it possible or not? Is it usually difficult or not? So the umum of the udhr, right? How common is this? Number one. And number two, your own shortcoming. What does the ayah mention? فَمَنِ اضْطُرَّ غَيْرَ عَادٍ غَيْرَ بَاغٍ وَلَا عَادٍ. You didn't want to do that. So you weren't trying to eat pork, nor were you eating more pork than you had to, right? So now scenarios where there's taqsir. You got the fly and got all these flies and made a big fly paste and put it in your cup of tea. And I said, oh, well, the Prophet said if a fly goes in your tea, it's excused. Yeah, but Habibi, fly going in your tea is very different to you collecting flies, mashing them up and putting them in your tea, right? So now there's taqsir on your behalf, right? There's a big difference between, I don't know, there's some blood on the meat because obviously there's always going to be some blood in the meat versus you collecting the blood from the meat, right? Taqsir, right? You've done something wrong. There's a shortcoming on your behalf. So here it's kind of like, why didn't you know where the water was, right? Okay, why didn't you know there's water is? So now this again, how does this help us? We're going to have a discussion in the Shafi school. Is if you didn't know, if you forgot that you had najasa on you in prayer. So the qadim is that if you didn't know you had najasa on you in prayer, it's excused. The jadid is that it's not excused. So now, and Imam Nawawi, his ikhtiyar is the qadim. So you want to follow your tarjih as a Salafi or as a mutamadhib is the qadim. Fantastic. So now somebody asks you, what about I knew that I had najasa on me, but then I forgot and I prayed. You're like, aha, here's the answer, right? So if we go to that bab, right, I'm going to open the Rawda right now, I'll show you. And we ask the Malikis as well. The Malikis, I'm sure they have that same mas'ala. They say that if you didn't know you had najasa, it's excused. But if you forgot that you had najasa, it's not excused. What's the difference? Not knowing and forgetting are the same. You don't know. Yeah, but there's a taqsir. You should have known, right? So here, this is what I mean by learning a madhab is a matrix, in that it's a whole complex system that helps you quickly find answers to things and can make connections and be consistent, right? Somewhere else, you're going to be, how is forgetfulness relevant? How is it not relevant? How is ignorance relevant? How is ignorance not relevant? Here, looking in this Rawda in 20202. But notice how we say that when you're praying and you forgot that you were praying, that's fine, right? So you could do a whole scenario of where forgetfulness is accepted, where it's not. And what are the variables that affect whether it's going to be an excuse or not? Doesn't mention it. So it doesn't mention that discussion. Here in the Rawda, it's very, very brief. So it says if you pray with the najasa on you and you didn't know about it, then the adhar, he calls it. The adhar, notice he does, look. So he says, فَإِن لَمْ يَكُنْ عَلِمَهَا وَجَبَ الْإِعَادَةُ عَلَى الْأَظْهَرِ. So notice here, he doesn't mention it as qadim and jadid. In the Rawda, he mentions it as adhar and khilaf al-adhar, which is that interesting. What does that mean? What's the difference between qadim and jadid versus adhar and khilaf al-adhar? What's the difference between a position being adhar and khilaf al-adhar versus qadim and jadid? Okay, if we said al-asah, what does that mean? Or as-sahih? What's the ikhtilaf between? If we said al-asah or sahih, the ikhtilaf is between Ammar, are you there?
Between the ashab.
Ashab, thank you, Muhammad. So, if the ikhtilaf is between the ashab, we will say as-sahihu kada, wal-da'ifu kada. And if the ikhtilaf is strong, al-asahhu kada. Right? That means it's strong debate. For example, what's the asah is that if you miss a prayer on purpose, you have to make it up immediately. So the Khurasaniyin, they say no, you have to make it up whenever you want. Right? The Iraqiyin, they say no, you have to make it up immediately. So Imam Nawawi says the asah is the qawl of the Iraqiyin. You have to make it up immediately. What's the proof? He has his proof. But it's a strong debate, not a weak debate. Okay? So the debate between the ashab, sahih or asah. Sahih, if it's a weak debate, and asah, if it's a strong debate. And then we have qadim and jadid, Imam Shafi's old position that he rejected, and Imam Shafi's new position that he died on. Okay? As opposed to al-azharu kada or al-mashhuru kada. Al-mashhur means, for example, the mashhur is that when you come out of the first rak'ah and you're going into the second rak'ah, you pause, you do jilsat istiraha. That is the mashhur, right? Khilaf al-mashhur, right, which is, I guess, shadh or something like that, is that it's not recommended. But that's khilaf. That's a very weak position that ascribed to Imam Shafi, right? And then we have al-adhar, that Imam Shafi'i died on two positions, 2 or 3 positions in his jadid. The more correct one is this. Okay, so I believe elsewhere, not in the Rawda, we see it as qadim and jadid. The qadim that he rejected is that if you pray with najasa on you, you have to, and you didn't know about it, the prayer is fine. And the jadid is that it doesn't matter if you didn't know about it or not, right? Here in the Rawdah, he doesn't make it as Qadim and Jadid, he makes it as Azhar, meaning Imam Shafi had two positions in his final opinion, and the more correct one is this. Does that make sense? Is that you have to repeat it regardless. Does that make sense? Musa, you there? Ammar?
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the connection now? There's a scenario where I'm praying and I had najasa on me, but I didn't know. Okay, so I was traveling and I had water with me, but I didn't know. Okay, that's fine. I was praying and I had najasa on me and I knew that I had najasa on me, but I forgot. I was traveling and I had water with me, but I forgot or I couldn't find out where it was. Okay. So here he says in the issue of tahara, he says, وَإِنْ عَلِمَهَا ثُمَّ نَسِيَهَا وَجَبَتْ قَطْعًا. Right? He says, if you knew about it and then forgot about it, I knew I had filth on me, but then I forgot about it, وَجَبَتْ قَطْعًا. Right? وَقِيلَ عَلَى الْقَوْلَيْنِ. There's also two positions. So this mas'ala is exactly the same mas'ala. Right? Same discussion. So what's going to happen is we're going to create discussions or frameworks and then copy them. We're going to do machine learning. That's what we're doing. Right? We'll do machine learning. So the Salafi is not allowing himself to do machine learning. Does that make sense? Because he doesn't do tamadhub. So he doesn't have these scenarios. Even if I said, go ahead, do tarjih, I don't mind. Say this position is correct, that position, I don't really care. But what you will do is, as soon as you say A, now with A, there is 10 discussions that come free with A. And if you choose B, there's another free, but you don't do that because you don't have a madhab. Does that make sense? So you can't copy and paste because you're basically your what the opinions you're adopting are so shallow and impoverished. Whereas when I adopt an opinion here, I go with, so Imam Nawawi adopts the position, for example, that his own position, his own ikhtiyar is that when you're praying and you didn't know, right? So therefore he's now adopting something else somewhere else already. And that mas'ala is already solved for him. Does that make sense? Yeah. You're all following? Is that Ammar there? Okay, great. Right. So here again we're learning systems. An-nasi غير مكلف, right? An-nasi ma'ذور. Somebody who forgets something is not excused, is excused. Not always. Not always, right? And this is an ibadat, right? Go
The
ahead,
reason
Muhammad.
behind that is so forgetting is negligence because you are supposed to remove the najasa immediately, or like do use, maybe even you could have done wudu with the water and kept your wudu.
Yeah, so why did you forget where the water was? So it's not that you didn't know that it was there. It was that you forgot, right? So now we're going to say that's not normal. You're going to have to repeat the prayers. Okay. أو إضلاله في رحله لوجود الماء معه ونسبته في إهماله not caring about it حتى نسيه أو أضله إلى تقصير بخلاف ما لو أدرج في رحله ماء أدرج عفوا ولم يشعر به somebody put water in there and he didn't know about it أو أضل رحله الذي فيه الماء. So it's not, you can't find where the water is on this camel or in this truck. I don't even know where that truck is. Right? So it says أضل رحله الذي فيه الماء في رحال. Right? So I don't even know which truck it's in. There's 8 trucks, 20 trucks. I don't even know where the water is. The water is in the middle row of the boxes in one of these things, but I don't know which one it is. Right? So he says, mentions a similar scenario. It says كإضلال رحله ما لو كان هناك بئر خفية. There's a small hidden well under, maybe things have grown over it. لم يشعر بها. So he actually walked past this well. You're like, you stopped under that tree. So yeah, there's a well on the other side of the tree. So, bro, I didn't even see the well. It looks like it's hidden. بخلاف الظاهرة, Habibi, you walk past a giant well with water pouring out everywhere, and it was shining, and all the birds were flying there. And this guy walked past you saying, Alhamdulillah, I have a well, and you didn't hear him and you didn't see it. No, Habibi, you have a problem. Right? Does that make sense? So you're not sinful, of course, but you're going to have to make up that prayer, because how did you make tayammum for lack of water when there's a well right in front of you and you just happen to not have seen it and everyone was walking to it and you happen to not noticed? How is that possible? Does that make sense? So the issue of taqsir, not that you're morally bad, the issue that is kind of weird. Does that make sense? Okay. Go ahead, Mustafa.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat this one more time? I'm just a little lost.
So it's similar. So the scenario of so you said the scenario was that how did you know you knew that the water was somewhere in your car? How did you lose the water if you knew it was there? How did you forget where it is in your bag? How did you forget that it was in your car when you yourself knew and put it there? So that's a bit weird. You're not sinful now for not making wudu and making tayammum instead, but you're going to have to make up this prayer. So later on, you realize, oh my God, the water was there the whole time. Oh yeah, I put it there. Ah, right? Because that's not normal and weird, and there's a level of shortcoming on your behalf, you have to repeat that prayer. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes
Then a
sense.
similar scenario he mentions the Hashia is I said, listen, this is the route. I gave you the map, go this way, this way, this way, this way. There's a well right here. You're like, I have no idea. I said, there's a well right there. Like, and you're like, I'm bro, like we stopped at the place that you told me to stop and there was no well. Okay, did you see anybody? So yeah, there was tons of people. Where were they going? I don't know. Habibi, had you turned around, you would see all of them walking towards a gigantic well. Like, how is it while you were walking past the well that I told you to stop at, you happen to look to the right and keep walking for 500 meters and then not notice the well and not notice all the people going there? And then at that point, you made tayammum as well. Like, what's your problem? Right? So I'm not saying you're sinful, but because you're like daft, you know that phrase, the British English, like you're kind of like, you're not with it. Like, how is that possible? Because that is there's a level of taqsir in it. You're gonna have to repeat that prayer. So you made tayammum, that's fine, but you made tayammum in a place where there's a big well and you just didn't even see it, and it was obvious, right? He says بخلاف الظاهرة, right? So he says وكإضلاله رحله ما لو كان هناك بئر خفية, right? لم يشعر بها. There's a tiny little well that was grown over and you couldn't notice it. Okay, not a problem. On the map, it says there's a well here. You can't find it. and I tell you there's a well there, you don't have to repeat that prayer because it's hard to find. As opposed to this gigantic well that everybody's going to, but you happen to just not notice it for some random reason. Does that make sense? Just like in Ramadan. So you said you grew up in Mecca, yeah, and you used to attend the classes of Sheikh so and so, yeah, and you didn't know you can't drink in Ramadan, yeah. Like nobody ever told you that. You didn't notice the fact that everyone was like, "Man, I'm thirsty," and you're like, "Yeah, I don't know why that guy's thirsty." I always wonder why people complain about being thirsty in Ramadan. I just drink the whole day. Like, how did you not know that? I honestly didn't know that. So we're going to say you're not sinful because you're just a bit of a head case, right? You're not sinful for breaking your fast in Ramadan, but you do have to do qada because it's not normal for somebody growing up in a Muslim country or knowing the basic or being around fuqaha to not know that you can't drink during Ramadan. It's not normal. It's normal for a new Muslim who's told him fast. You go to the doctor says you fast, meaning don't don't have anything but water. You can have water when you're medically fasting. So you understand fast, right? You hadn't read the Quran. It didn't say, eating and drinking. You don't know about that, right? So whatever, it didn't cross your mind. Intercourse, no idea about intercourse, connection with fasting, no idea, right? But you grew up with fuqaha. How is that possible? So we're going to say that your jahl is enough to make you free of sin because you didn't know. What can you say? But you can still have to do qada because that's not normal for someone in your shoes not to know that. Does that make sense? Right. Now, when we come to the rights of other people, that's totally different. So al-jahl with nisyan, it doesn't matter. Because when we say ad-darurat tubih al-mahdhurat, they don't allow take someone else's rights. So whether you knew or you didn't know is irrelevant in terms of other people's rights. So two different discussions. Right. I had no idea that I had to support my wife. She's always like, so when are you going to pay for the bills? And I don't know, when are you going to pay for the bills? You know? She's like, well, you have to pay for it. I was like, well, no, you have to pay for it. So 20 years later, she goes to court and she wants all the money back that she paid. And he's like, yeah, but I didn't know that. I didn't know I had to support her. It doesn't matter whether you knew or not. Right? In your culture, for example, women support men. And that's what all Muslims do in your culture. Whether it was known or not known is irrelevant. Right? I didn't know I couldn't kill people. Right? I had no idea. Right? So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you knew or don't know. You accidentally picked up my mug and drank it. You didn't know that was mine, right? It's irrelevant. So when it comes to the rights of other people, being forced at gunpoint, for example. So at gunpoint, you were forced to break my car and steal it. You still owe me the money, right? For breaking the car. You forgot and leant against my car, and I told you don't lean against it because the window's fragile, and you broke it. You still have to pay for it. You didn't know, right? It doesn't matter, right? So in terms of rights of other people, that's not what we're talking about. But in terms of the halal, haram, and ibadat, to what extent is nisyan an excuse? To what extent is jahl an excuse? To what extent is ikrah an excuse? We're going to look at these different things. How common is it? Is there a level of taqsir? Other things involved, right? Does that make sense? So that's why in Hajj, if you look at the things that are haram in Hajj, sometimes ignorance and forgetfulness will alleviate you from having to pay the fidya, and sometimes they won't. Why? Because some of the things in haram are to do with quote unquote the rights, RIGHT, and there are some are to do with the rights, RITES. For example, not putting perfume on. Who did you wrong by putting perfume on? What did you violate? Right? You just violated the rights of Hajj. But you didn't know, for example, you accidentally put perfume on. Okay, it's okay. But you reversed into a gazelle. I didn't know it was there. I was just reversing. It doesn't matter. You've killed a gazelle. This gazelle is sacred, and so you have to expiate because it's like killing somebody. It's like taking someone's money by accident, right? And then they have the question, okay, what about cutting your nails then? Cutting my nails, is that like putting perfume on? Like it's a nice thing to do? Or is it considered destruction? If it's considered destruction, it's like destroying someone's property. So in which case, it doesn't matter if you did it on purpose or not, or if you knew about it or not. It's irrelevant. You're gonna have to expiate, right? Whereas if we say no, it's like perfume or intercourse and all that. Like you had no idea that touching your wife with lust was haram during haram. I had no idea. So then there's no expiation because it's not you didn't destroy anything, right? As opposed to um, cutting nails or cutting hair, you destroyed something, right? You cut something off. So is it in category A or is it category B? Will the nisyan and jahal be an excuse or not? Same discussion. Does that make sense? Right. Okay. ووضع الساتر من جبيرة أو لصوق فهو أعم من قوله وضع الجبيرة على غير طهر. Right. بخلاف وضعه على طهر كما في الخف بجامع وجوب المسح بالماء على كل منهما. Right, you have to wipe on both of them, so the same thing. So therefore, it's like you have to have wudu or ghusl when you put it on. Okay, inshallah, we'll stop here. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. Okay. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.